Hi everyone, my name's Janice Wallace, and I'm going to be your instructor in EDU510 over the next several weeks. As you know, probably in talking to other students who've taken the course and so on, they're going to be busy weeks, but I think that they will be weeks that will be really key in many ways to the kind of work that you're going to be doing in your research project that will be coming up shortly after this course is finished. So my job will be to prepare you for that whole process, and I look forward to that. This is a course I've been teaching for several years, and in each case there's always something a little different about each class and the needs that they represent and the interests in particular that they represent, but it's always interesting and I always learn a lot, and I hope that they do too, and I hope that you will as well. I thought you might be interested in knowing a little bit more about me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself in this video, and you'll also find out more about me and also your other colleagues in a forum that you'll find that I'll be talking about in another short video about the eClass page. And on that page, there's a little forum for getting to know one another. It's called 10 Things About Me. So I'm going to just list 10 things of potential interest about me, and I hope that you'll do the same about you. And it's always fun kind of finding out things about other people that you had no idea about, even though you may have known them for a while. At any rate, so at the beginning of the course, I think it's important for us to get to know one another and kind of get to know what to expect from each other and how we approach the course and that sort of thing. So I've been a teacher all my adult life. In fact, I started teaching when I was 18 years old. And in those days, way back in Middle Ages, finished grade 13 in Ontario, took 1 year of teachers college and started teaching a class, if you can believe it, and had a great time teaching a group of young kids who in grades 3 and 4. It's a small school, and I had the opportunity, most of my students actually, their parents were university professors, and so it was a really interesting experience for a very young teacher to be teaching and then having, you know, parent-teacher nights with university professors at that age. It was a little bit crazy, but you know, when you're young, you don't know any better, and I just enjoyed every bit of it. And I continued to enjoy teaching. I moved to Toronto, taught in an elementary school for a few years there, brand new school with a very interesting kind of architecture and that sort of thing, and had a lot of fun putting together our classes and taking advantage of this very interesting architecture. And then I moved to the United States, where I couldn't teach anymore because I was not qualified to teach in the state that I was in. And so I did other kinds of things related to education, but not specifically about, you know, in the educational milieu. My marriage ended. I had 2 children. I had to come back to Canada if I was going to be working, and I was very happy to do so. And I moved back to Ontario and tried to find a teaching job. And at that time, there was just absolutely nothing available. I had lots of friends in Ontario who were trying to find me a job, but there just wasn't anything. And so at a coffee clutch kind of thing, I was talking to a friend of mine whose husband actually worked for the Department of Indian Affairs, as it was called at that time. And he headed up the schools. He didn't head up the schools himself, but he was one of the people who hired people for the schools in Indigenous communities. And so she asked me if I would be interested, and I said, well, I was kind of, you know, I needed something, and I said sure, but I said it a little reluctantly because I knew for sure that I really wasn't prepared properly for teaching in a First Nations community. Like most teachers at the time, I had absolutely no background whatsoever in Indigenous issues. I knew very little about the communities that were nearby, and I say that with great shame, really, because you know, I should have known so much more. The system should have been so much better in doing the kind of work that was necessary, but we weren't. So I applied for the job. I got interviewed right before Labor Day weekend, got the job, and I started and was, you know, jumped right into a situation that I was totally unprepared for. So I had to kind of pick myself up. Had been very successfully teaching, but I couldn't say that at that point. And I started talking to a lot of people in the community, started doing a lot of reading, and ended up taking some university courses, which was something that I'd wanted to do for a long time, but this was a necessity. So I started learning more about Indigenous history in Canada, more about Indigenous education issues and that sort of thing. And that became the impetus actually for me to finish my degree and get on with my education. Because as I said, at the time when I started teaching after end of grade 13. And so I had this wonderful opportunity then to go back to the university. I had a great excuse to do so and a need to do so, and off I went. When I was finished my degree, I decided that I wanted to continue and do my master's. And I had already applied. There was a big change in the governance in Indigenous education in Ontario at the time, and in actual fact across Canada, which meant that we were going to have to be rehired. And so I'd been approved for a sabbatical. So I was assured that I could take my sabbatical, but I was no longer it was a kind of a complex relationship, and I won't bore you with all the details. But nevertheless, I knew that I could go back if I wanted to. The school would want me. So off I went to do my master's, and my idea was that I would be there for a year, and then do my project while I was teaching. And, like so many other teachers. And I remember I was in the line at Western, which is the university I went to for my master's. And Rebecca Coulter, who was one of the professors, was standing behind me. And she was walking behind me and said to me, she had been a teacher too when she went to university, but she just sort of never left, and maybe I wouldn't leave either. And I thought, well, ha ha ha, isn't that funny? And in my wildest imaginations, I would never have expected that that would be the case, but sure enough, I ended up doing my master's. I ended up doing a thesis, which took longer, and I was teaching by that time at the university, at the faculty, and enjoying the experience of doing both teaching, research, and I was involved in a whole bunch of service committees as well. So I thought this is a lifestyle that I enjoy, and I was beginning to understand as well that that Indigenous issues, while I remained committed to them and continued to work on them in a whole lot of other ways, as invited, I needed to rethink my positioning in terms of Indigenous education. So I ended up finishing my master's and deciding to go on and do my PhD. And at that point, I had decided to take up gender issues, particularly in the context of the gender equity policy that was being implemented in Ontario at the time. I was interested in particular in how power operated in organizations, and because there were questions that were revealed to me when I was working in an Indigenous community that really raised some very significant issues in that area, and I began to see how that worked as well around issues of gender, race, class, and so on and so forth. So I decided that I would go to OISE at the University of Toronto. I continued to teach at Western, but I was taking classes at OISE and doing my work there. So I had kind of two wonderful academic families encouraging me in my work. And I completed my my doctoral work. By that time, I was actually hired at Western as a tenure track professor. And so I continued to work on my on the kind of work that I've been doing all along, but now counted towards tenure. And in the meantime, my two children, who were now very grown and living out west, kept saying to me, "Mom, why don't you come west? It's really great out here." And I had traveled out that way, but I hadn't spent much time out that way. And in the meantime, a good friend of mine that I had gotten to know through conferences and that sort of thing had encouraged me to apply for a position at the University of Alberta. And I didn't know a lot about the University of Alberta other than it was a very large university. I'd been to a conference here and was impressed by its what was going on at the faculty and some of the people that I met. But that was about it. I didn't know the city at all. Anyway, I got the job, and here I was in Edmonton, and I taught there in the Department of Educational Policy Studies for most of that time. But for the last 5 years, I think it was, of my time at the University of Alberta, just before I took a sabbatical and then came back for a while and then retired. I was the Associate Dean in Undergraduate Student Services, along with Susan Barker, who was also another Associate Dean in Student Services, and then Clive Hickson replaced her when she moved on. And I took on that role because I was really interested in looking at the program and the kind of programmatic changes that were the faculty was working on at the time. So that became my primary responsibility. I did retire. I retired to Victoria, which was a city that I had gone to while I was doing my PhD. I was invited to come out here to teach for a summer and fell in love with the place and thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice to live here someday? And lo and behold, found a little place near Beacon Hill Park that I could afford because Victoria is a very expensive place to live, as you know. And so here I am. And I'm very thankful to live in such a welcoming environment, a welcoming weather environment. For somebody who has asthma, it's a great place to be. So that's kind of the quick and dirty story of my educational background. I have 2 children, as I mentioned. Chris, who is in Calgary and works for one of the large oil companies, and his daughter, Sequoia, who is now a university student at Mount Royal, and his wife, Pauline, who's from California. And it found her way up here thanks to Chris, and has gotten used to the cold weather in the winter. And so they're a great group of people, and I feel lucky to have them as part of my family. And then my daughter, who lives here in Victoria now with her husband, and they both work for the government, as many people do here in Victoria. She does a lot of work around equity policy in the government, and so that's been kind of an interesting transition into a whole different context for the kind of work that I've been doing at in my academic work. So that's a little bit about me. Don't have any pets. Those pets that I have had have always been cats. I'm a real cat person. My daughter has 2 cats. They just adopted 2 cats after their wonderful cat Ted died, and so it took 2 to replace him. And they're crazy little guys, but they're having lots of fun. And so Gigi and Gandalf have joined the family. And then in Calgary, I've got a dog and a cat. So I've got Chico, and I've got a Foster, who is a lovely little cat that they're fostering for a while. So that's sort of my little family and some of the things that we're into. My son and his wife are great bikers and hikers and all that sort of thing. And they're coming out for Christmas this year, and I expect that they'll be doing a lot of that while they're here because this is a great place for that kind of thing. So I hope that this has acquainted you a little bit with me, and I hope too that what you've taken from some of what I'm saying is that I am deeply committed to teaching. I'm deeply committed to the kind of work that we'll be doing in this course and the kinds of questions that you're going to be asking and trying to find some understanding of in the research that you do. And that's always been a fascinating part of doing this course, is the kinds of issues that people find themselves looking at. So I'll talk to you more about the course itself in a separate video and how it kind of hangs together. But I do want you to know that whenever you have any kind of issue, because goodness, we know after the last few years that life happens, and it happens sometimes in very challenging ways. If anything happens during the course that is making you feel like maybe you've taken on more than you can chew, because it is a busy course and it's demanding in its own way, always talk to me and feel that you can come and talk to me. And I can almost guarantee, except for in the most exceptional of circumstances, that we'll be able to work something out together. So never hesitate to do that. Always feel that you can come to me, talk to me about any questions you have along the way, issues that you wonder about, and certainly if you have issues come up that make it challenging for you to continue in the course in some way or get an assignment done or whatever, make sure that you talk to me about that, okay? So that's all I have to say in this video. I hope that you found it a little bit inviting and instructive, and we'll be talking more and getting to know one another a lot more during the course. So take care.